"Pick anything you want," he said, until his daughters said, "We want that Apache woman as our mom." Every subscribe helps keep these forgotten stories alive. Every like tells YouTube to share these emotions with someone who needs them today, so we can bring you more powerful tales that make you feel, think, and believe again. The trader's wagon stood at the edge of the frontier town, its canvas snapping in the hot, restless wind. Dust hung in the air as settlers moved past, bargaining loudly for flour, tools, and cloth. Silas McCrae stood a little apart from the noise, one hand resting on his rifle strap, the other holding his daughters close. Emma, 10 years old and already too familiar with loss, watched everything with sharp, careful eyes. Little Lily clung to her father's coat, her gaze drifting from face to face as if she were searching for something she could not yet name. 2 winters had passed since their mother's death, and the emptiness of their ranch followed them wherever they went. A broad-shouldered trader smiled at the girls and spread his hands toward the wagon. "Pick anything you want," he said easily. "Blankets, sugar, flour. Your pa's credit is good here." Emma glanced at the goods but felt nothing stir inside her. Lily, however, had gone still. Her small fingers tightened around Silas's sleeve as she stared beyond the wagon, toward a lone cottonwood tree at the edge of the clearing. Beneath its shade sat an Apache woman, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Her dark hair was braided with care, her dress worn but clean, and despite the dust on her skin, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that set her apart from the crowd. She did not plead or avert her eyes. She simply watched the world as if she had already endured its worst. Silas followed Lily's gaze and frowned. "Don't look there," he murmured. "She's not part of the trade." The trader chuckled. "Just a woman I found after a skirmish. No family left. She'll be sent on when someone decides what to do with her." The words unsettled Emma. She studied the woman's face and saw no fear there, only a deep, familiar loneliness. Lily took a hesitant step forward, then another, until she stood close enough to meet the woman's eyes. For a heartbeat, the noise of the town faded. The Apache woman's expression softened, and she offered the smallest nod, as if recognizing something in the child. Lily turned back to her father, her voice steady despite her size. "Papa," she said, "she looks like our house feels." Emma swallowed hard and squeezed Silas's hand. "We don't want the blankets," she added quietly. Silas looked down at his daughters, confused. "Then what do you want?" Both girls spoke together, their words clear and unshaken. "We want that Apache woman as our mom." The ranch house felt different the moment Ayana crossed its threshold. The floorboards creaked beneath her careful steps, and the air carried the faint memory of another woman's laughter, long faded but not forgotten. Silas watched closely, half expecting the house itself to reject her. Yet something unseen seemed to settle instead, like dust after a storm. Ayana set her small bundle down near the door and stood quietly, unsure where she belonged. She had been offered shelter, nothing more, and she carried that, understanding with the caution of someone who had learned not to hope too quickly. Emma wasted no time. She took Ayana's hand and pulled her toward the kitchen, pointing out the cracked window that let in the morning sun and the old table where their mother used to knead bread. Lily followed, holding a wildflower she had picked along the fence line, placing it gently in Ayana's palm as if sealing a promise. Ayana's fingers trembled slightly as they closed around the stem. She smiled then, a soft, surprised smile that made the room feel warmer. She worked without being asked. She swept the floors, cooked simple meals, and mended torn clothes with practiced hands. Yet there was nothing hurried or fearful in her movements. She moved with quiet respect, as though honoring the space rather than trying to earn her place in it. At night, when the wind howled across the plains and pressed against the walls, the girls slept closer to her than to their father. For the first time in months, Silas heard laughter drifting from their room instead of restless turning and whispered tears. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, Silas paused in the hallway. Lily's voice floated through the cracked door, small but earnest. She was praying the way her mother had taught her, hands folded tight. She thanked God for the food, the horses, and then her voice wavered. She thanked him for bringing them a new mom and asked, in a trembling whisper, that she not be taken away. Silas leaned his shoulder against the wall, his chest tightening. He had told himself this was temporary, a kindness that would soon pass. But his daughters had already decided otherwise. They were building something fragile and precious, and he feared the world would not allow it to last. Later that night, Ayana sat by the hearth, staring into the dying embers. Silas saw the shadows in her eyes, the same ones he carried himself. Without words, he understood that she was not just filling an empty place in his home. She was healing one in her own heart, and in doing so, was slowly bringing theirs back to life. The pounding of hooves shattered the quiet, just as dawn began to thin the darkness. Silas was already awake, a habit carved into him by years on the frontier, and his hand went to his rifle before the sound fully reached his mind. He stepped onto the porch as 3 men rode into the yard, their horses lathered and their faces hard. Trouble clung to them like dust. Behind him, the door creaked softly, and he knew Ayana had risen as well. The lead rider did not bother with greetings. "We've come for the Apache woman," he said flatly. "Word is she's hiding here. She don't belong on a white man's land." Silas kept his voice even, though his pulse thundered in his ears. "This is my ranch," he said. "Everyone under this roof belongs here." The man spat into the dirt. "You think that changes what she is?" Before Silas could answer, Ayana stepped forward, her back straight, her chin lifted. The early light caught in her eyes, calm and unafraid. "I will leave if I must," she said quietly. "I will not bring blood to this home." Emma burst through the door, followed by Lily, both barefoot and shaking but fierce in their resolve. Emma planted herself in front of Ayana, her small arms spread wide. "She's our family," she said, her voice breaking but not bending. Lily clutched the hem of Ayana's dress, tears streaking her cheeks. "She reads us stories," she cried. "She sings when we're scared." The men shifted in their saddles, unease flickering across their faces. This was not the resistance they had expected. Silas felt something harden inside him, something he had been circling but never fully claimed. He raised his rifle, not in threat but in certainty. "You heard my daughters," he said. "She stays. If you want her, you'll have to go through me." For a long moment no one moved. The wind whispered through the grass, and a meadowlark called from the fence post. Finally, the lead rider cursed under his breath and turned his horse. "This ain't over," he muttered as they rode away, their silhouettes shrinking against the rising sun. When the yard was quiet again, Ayana's strength faltered. She bowed her head, tears spilling freely now. Silas lowered his rifle and placed a hand over hers. "You don't have to run anymore," he said softly. She looked up at him, disbelief and hope tangled together. "You would stand against the world for us?" Silas glanced at his daughters, who clung to Ayana as if she were already theirs by every right that mattered. "I already am," he replied. Spring arrived gently, as if the land itself sensed the need for kindness. New grass pushed through the cracked earth, and wildflowers painted the fields in quiet colors. The ranch no longer felt like a place surviving day to day. It felt alive again. Laughter carried on the wind, light and unafraid, and even the old walls seemed to breathe easier. Silas watched his daughters run across the yard with Ayana, their hands linked, and realized how deeply the shape of his life had changed. The girls learned more than chores and lessons that season. From Ayana they learned patience, the meaning of listening before speaking, and songs sung low and slow at night, meant to chase away bad dreams. In return, Emma taught her how to read English words from worn books, and Lily showed her where the sun warmed the porch best in the afternoon. Love grew in the quiet spaces, unnoticed at first, then undeniable. Silas found himself changing too. He learned that strength did not always mean standing alone, and that protecting a family required more than a rifle and a strong back. Some evenings he and Ayana sat side by side, watching the sky fade from gold to deep blue, speaking little, understanding much. There was no rush, no fear pressing them forward. What formed between them grew steady and sure, built on respect and shared wounds. When Silas asked Ayana to stay forever, it was not with grand words or promises he could not keep. He simply told her that his home was no longer whole without her, and that his daughters already called her mother in their hearts. Ayana wept then, not from pain, but from the weight of finally being chosen. She accepted with a quiet nod, her hand resting over his, grounding them both. Their wedding was small, held beneath the same cottonwood tree where fate had first crossed their paths. There were no crowds, only open sky, the whisper of grass, and two smiling girls who could barely contain their joy. Emma stood tall, pride shining in her eyes, while Lily squeezed Ayana's hand as if afraid she might disappear. That night, as the stars stretched endlessly above the plains, Silas listened to his daughters fall asleep, their voices drifting through the house once more. He understood then what they had known from the beginning. When given the chance to choose anything, they had chosen love, and in doing so, they had given all of them a future far richer than anything he could have imagined.